The stagecoach rattled into Cheyenne, Wyoming territory on a blistering afternoon in July of 1878, and the woman who stepped down from it looked like she was running from the devil himself. Her emerald traveling dress was covered in dust from the 2-week journey, her dark auburn hair had come loose from its pins, and her green eyes darted across the bustling street with the wariness of a hunted animal. She clutched a single worn carpetbag to her chest as if it contained everything she owned in the world, which it very nearly did. Cole Brennan was leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon when he first saw her, and something about the fear in her stance made him straighten up and take notice. He had been working as a ranch hand on the Double T for 3 years now, saving every penny he could to buy his own piece of land someday, and he had learned to read people the way he read weather patterns on the horizon. This woman was trouble, but not the kind she caused herself. This was the kind that followed. She stood there on the wooden sidewalk looking lost, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar buildings as if trying to decide where safety might lie. Cole found himself walking toward her before he had made a conscious decision to do so, his boots making soft thuds against the weathered planks. "Miss, you look like you could use some directions," he said, keeping his voice gentle and removing his hat in a gesture of respect. Up close, she was even more striking than he had first thought, with high cheekbones and full lips that trembled slightly as she looked up at him. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, just a few years younger than his own 27 years. "I need to find a boarding house," she said, and her voice carried the refined accent of the eastern cities, probably Boston or New York. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere people do not ask too many questions." Cole studied her for a moment, noting the way her knuckles were white where she gripped the carpetbag, the way she kept glancing back at the stagecoach station as if expecting someone to emerge from it at any moment. "Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable place 2 streets over. She minds her own business and she keeps a clean establishment. I can walk you there if you would like." Relief flooded the woman's face, though wariness still lingered in her eyes. "That would be very kind of you, Mr. Brennan, Cole Brennan, and you are." She hesitated for just a fraction too long. Catherine Moore. He knew immediately that Moore was not her real surname, but he did not call her on the lie. Whatever she was running from was her own business, at least for now. He offered his arm, and after a moment's consideration, she took it, her touch light and uncertain through the fabric of his shirt. They walked in silence through the dusty streets of Cheyenne, past the blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil filled the air, past the general store with its painted sign advertising everything from flour to firearms. The town was growing rapidly, swollen with settlers and cattle ranchers and men seeking their fortunes in the goldfields farther west. It was the kind of place where a person could disappear if they wanted to, which Cole suspected was exactly what Catherine Moore needed, Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a 2-story structure painted white, with green shutters and a front porch that boasted actual rocking chairs. It was one of the nicer buildings in town, a testament to the widow Patterson's good management and shrewd business sense. Cole knocked on the door and waited, very aware of Catherine's nervous energy beside him. The landlady who answered was a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes took in Catherine's expensive but travel-worn dress, her quality boots caked with road dust, and the single bag she carried. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Catherine Moore. She is new to Cheyenne and looking for a room," Cole said, giving the widow his most charming smile. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. She had always had a weakness for Cole, who had helped her repair her fence last spring and never accepted payment. "I have 1 room available on the 2nd floor. It is small but clean. $3 a week, meals included except Sunday supper." Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a small purse. "I would like to pay for a month in advance, if that is acceptable." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "That would be just fine, Miss Moore. Come in, come in." "Mr. Brennan, thank you for bringing her by." Cole knew a dismissal when he heard one, but he found himself reluctant to leave Catherine just yet. He touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Moore, if you need anything, you can usually find me at the Double T Ranch just north of town or sometimes at the saloon in the evenings. Welcome to Cheyenne." She looked at him with those startling green eyes, and he saw gratitude there mixed with something else he could not quite name. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. You have been very kind." He thought about her all through the rest of that day as he rode back to the ranch, as he helped move cattle from one pasture to another, as he sat down to dinner with the other ranch hands in the bunkhouse. There was a mystery to Catherine Moore, layers of secrets that both intrigued and worried him. But more than that, there was something about her that called to something deep in his chest, something he had never felt before in all his years of drifting from ranch to ranch across the territories. 3 days passed before he saw her again. He had ridden into town to pick up supplies for the ranch, and he spotted her coming out of the general store carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. She wore a simpler dress now, gray cotton with white trim, and she had pinned her hair up in a neat bun that made her look both practical and pretty. "Miss Moore," he called out, guiding his horse over to where she stood. She looked up, and a genuine smile crossed her face when she recognized him. "Mr. Brennan, how nice to see you again." He dismounted, looping the reins around the hitching post. "How are you settling in? Is Mrs. Patterson treating you well?" "She is wonderful," Catherine said, and some of the tension he had seen in her shoulders the first day seemed to have eased. "The room is comfortable and the other boarders are quiet. I have even found a position helping at the schoolhouse. The teacher, Miss Williams, needs someone to assist with the younger children's reading lessons." "That is wonderful news," Cole said, meaning it. "Have you had a chance to see much of the town yet?" She shook her head. "Not really. I have been staying close to the boarding house mostly." He made a decision in that moment, one that probably was not entirely wise but felt right nonetheless. "Would you let me show you around?" "I promise I am a perfect gentleman and Mrs. Patterson can vouch for my character if you would like to ask her." Catherine bit her lip, clearly torn between caution and desire. Finally, she nodded. "I would like that, but I should return this package to my room first." "I will wait," Cole said, and he meant more than just the few minutes it would take her to run her errand. When she returned, he offered his arm again, and this time she took it without hesitation. They walked through Cheyenne together, and Cole pointed out the important landmarks. The telegraph office where messages could be sent back east. The marshal's office where a man named Tom Crawford kept what peace could be kept in a frontier town. The church where a circuit preacher held services twice a month. The restaurant that served the best steak in the territory. As they walked, Catherine began to relax, and Cole found himself telling her about his own story. How he had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, how his parents had died of fever when he was 19, how he had drifted west looking for something he could not quite name. How he had been working and saving for years now, dreaming of the day he could afford his own ranch, his own piece of the future that was being carved out of this wild land. "That sounds like a good dream," Catherine said softly. "Land of your own, a place to build something lasting." "What about you?" Cole asked, keeping his voice casual. "What brings you all the way out to Wyoming territory?" The shutters came down behind her eyes again, and he could see her weighing how much to tell him. They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open grassland that stretched toward distant mountains. She stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Can I trust you, Mr. Brennan?" "Cole," he corrected. "And yes, you can trust me." She studied his face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she took a deep breath and began to speak. "My real name is not Moore, it is Blackwell, Catherine Blackwell. My father was James Blackwell, and he owned a shipping company in Boston. He was an honest man, which turned out to be a dangerous thing to be." Cole waited, not interrupting, giving her the space to tell her story in her own time. There was another company, owned by a man named Victor Hartley. They were bringing in shipments that were not listed in any ledgers, crates that were loaded and unloaded in the dead of night. My father suspected they were smuggling, possibly weapons, possibly stolen goods. He started keeping records, documenting what he saw. Her voice caught, and Cole could see the pain in her eyes. They killed him, made it look like an accident, like he had fallen down the stairs at the warehouse. But I knew because 2 days before he died, he gave me a small journal where he had written everything down. He told me if anything happened to him, I was to take it to the authorities. Did you? Cole asked quietly. Catherine nodded. I tried. I went to the police, but half of them were on Hartley's payroll. The detective I spoke to seemed sympathetic at first, but then men started following me, watching my house. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to silence me the way they had silenced my father. So you ran, Cole said, understanding now the fear he had seen in her eyes that first day. I sold everything I could, took the money my father had left me, and bought a ticket on the first stagecoach headed west. I have been traveling for almost 3 weeks, changing my name, trying to cover my tracks. She looked up at him with those green eyes full of vulnerability and strength mixed together. I am sorry to burden you with this. You have been nothing but kind to me, and I am repaying that kindness by making you party to my troubles. Cole reached out and took her hand, feeling the delicate bones beneath soft skin. Catherine, you are not a burden, and your troubles are not your fault. This Hartley and his men, they are the ones in the wrong, not you. But they will come looking for me eventually, she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. As long as I have that journal, as long as I am alive to testify, I am a threat to them. I thought I could disappear out here, start over, but I am so afraid that I have only delayed the inevitable. Something fierce and protective rose up in Cole's chest, something he had never felt before with such intensity. He lifted her hand and held it between both of his own. Then the West is where you belong, with me. Catherine's eyes widened. Mr. Brennan, Cole, you barely know me. You cannot possibly want to involve yourself in this situation. These are dangerous men. I have faced down stampeding cattle, broken wild horses, stared down rustlers with guns drawn, Cole said, his voice steady and sure. I am not afraid of some Eastern criminals who think they can threaten a woman to keep their secrets safe. And as for barely knowing you, I know enough. I know you are brave. I know you did the right thing even when it put you in danger. I know that in the 3 days since I met you, I have thought about you more than I have thought about anything else in my entire life. A tear slipped down Catherine's cheek, and she made no move to wipe it away. Why would you do this? Why would you risk yourself for me? Cole smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Because the moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach, something in my chest said her, and I have learned to trust my instincts. Catherine let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was stepping closer, and Cole was wrapping his arms around her, holding her as she trembled against his chest. They stood there at the edge of town, the afternoon sun warm on their backs, and Cole made a silent promise to himself that he would protect this woman, no matter what it took. Over the next few weeks, Cole and Catherine became inseparable. He would ride into town every evening after his work at the ranch was done, and they would walk together or sit on Mrs. Patterson's porch talking until the stars came out. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about her mother who had died when Catherine was young, about her father who had been both parent and friend to her. He told her about his dreams for the future, about the piece of land he had his eye on just west of Cheyenne, about the house he wanted to build with his own 2 hands. They talked about everything and nothing, and with each passing day, Cole fell more deeply in love. He loved the way Catherine's eyes lit up when she talked about the children she was teaching. He loved her quick mind and dry sense of humor. He loved the way she was not afraid to challenge him when she disagreed with something he said. He loved her courage and her kindness, and the way she made him want to be a better man. But underneath their growing happiness, there was always the shadow of what she had left behind. Cole knew that Catherine checked the stagecoach arrivals every day, watching for any face that might be familiar, any sign that her past had caught up with her. He started making inquiries of his own, talking to the marshal about who had been asking questions around town, keeping an ear out for any strangers who seemed too interested in a woman traveling alone. It was early September when the first real sign of trouble appeared. Cole was in the saloon having a beer with some of the other ranch hands when a man walked in that he had never seen before. The stranger was dressed too well for a working man, in a tailored suit that marked him as someone from back east. He had cold eyes that swept the room with calculation, and when he approached the bar, Cole moved closer to hear what he would say. "I am looking for a woman," the stranger said to the bartender, his voice carrying the same cultured accent as Catherine's. Dark hair, green eyes, traveling alone. She would have arrived in the past month or so. "Have you seen anyone matching that description?" The bartender, a grizzled old-timer named Jack who had been serving drinks in Cheyenne since the town was founded, gave the stranger a long, measuring look. "Friend, half the women in this territory have dark hair. You are going to need to be more specific. Her name might be Catherine Blackwell, or she might be using a false name," the stranger said, pulling out a coin and sliding it across the bar. "There is more of that for anyone who can tell me where to find her." Cole felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm and keep drinking his beer as if he had not heard a word. Jack pocketed the coin but shook his head. "Do not recall anyone by that name, but I will keep my ears open." The stranger nodded and moved through the saloon, asking the same question of anyone who would listen. Most of the men ignored him or gave him vague non-answers. Strangers coming to town asking questions about women did not sit well with most decent folk, and Cheyenne might be rough around the edges, but it had its own code of honor. As soon as the man left, Cole tossed a coin on the bar and headed straight for Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. He took the porch steps 2 at a time and knocked urgently on the door. When the widow answered, he said, "I need to speak with Catherine. Now, it is important." Mrs. Patterson must have seen something in his face because she nodded immediately and went to fetch Catherine. When she appeared a moment later, Cole took her hand and led her out onto the porch, far enough from the door that they could not be overheard. "They are here," he said without preamble. "A man was just in the saloon asking about you, described you perfectly, said your name." The color drained from Catherine's face. "Oh God, I knew they would come. I knew it was only a matter of time." "Listen to me," Cole said, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "You are not alone in this anymore. We are going to figure this out together. Cole, you do not understand. If Hartley sent someone, they will not stop until they find me, and if you are with me, they will hurt you too." Her voice was rising with panic, and Cole could see the fear taking over. He cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. "Catherine, breathe, just breathe. That is it." He waited until her breathing steadied before continuing. "Now, here is what we are going to do. First, you are going to pack your things. Then I am going to talk to my boss at the ranch. Old Tom owes me more than a few favors, and he has a line shack up in the mountains that no one uses this time of year. It is remote, defensible, and nobody knows about it except the ranch hands. You will be safe there while I figure out our next move." "Our next move." Catherine repeated, her voice shaking. "Cole, you should not be involved in this at all." "Too late for that," he said with a small smile. "I am already involved. You are not getting rid of me that easily, Catherine Blackwell." Despite everything, she let out a watery laugh. "You are the most stubborn man I have ever met. And you are the bravest woman I have ever known," he replied, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "Now go pack. I will be back within the hour with horses and supplies." Cole rode harder than he ever had in his life back to the Double T Ranch. He found Tom Weston, the ranch owner, in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal any day now. Tom was a big man in his 60s with a weathered face and hands like leather, but he had a good heart and had always treated Cole fairly. "Tom, I need to ask you for something," Cole said without preamble. It is important, and I would not ask if there was any other way. Tom straightened up, his eyes sharp. What kind of trouble are you in, son? Not me, a woman. A good woman who did the right thing and now has dangerous men hunting her because of it. Cole quickly explained the situation, leaving out no details. When he finished, Tom was silent for a long moment. You are asking me to help hide a fugitive, Tom finally said. I am asking you to help protect an innocent woman from killers, Cole corrected. There is a difference. Tom studied him, then nodded slowly. You have been a good worker, Cole. Honest, reliable, never caused me a lick of trouble. If you say this woman is worth protecting, I believe you. Take the line shack. Take whatever supplies you need, but you be careful, you hear me? I do not want to lose my best ranch hand to some eastern gangsters. Relief flooded through Cole. Thank you, Tom. I swear I will make this right. See that you do, Tom said gruffly. And Cole. That land you have been saving up for, the piece you have had your eye on. I have been thinking about selling you a parcel of the Double T, good grazing, water access, enough acreage to start your own operation. We can work out terms if you are interested. Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. I would be very interested, sir. Then you make sure you stay alive to take me up on that offer, Tom said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now get going, and tell that woman of yours that she has friends in Wyoming, whether she knows it yet or not. Cole gathered everything they would need in record time. Horses, food, blankets, ammunition for his rifle and pistol. One of the other ranch hands, a young man named Billy, helped him pack the supplies without asking questions. The code of the West was clear. You helped your friends, and you did not pry into business that was not yours. By the time Cole made it back to town, dusk was falling. He left the horses tied outside Mrs. Patterson's boarding house and went to collect Catherine. She was waiting with her carpet bag packed and wearing a practical riding skirt she must have borrowed or bought since arriving in Cheyenne. Mrs. Patterson stood at the door, her face concerned. You take care of her, Cole Brennan. I will, ma'am. You have my word on that. They rode out of Cheyenne as the last light was fading from the sky, heading north and west toward the mountains. Cole knew the trail even in darkness, and he led them steadily higher, away from the roads and settlements, into country that few people ventured into unless they had good reason. Catherine followed without complaint, sitting her horse well despite being inexperienced at long-distance riding. It took them 3 hours to reach the line shack. It was a small, sturdy cabin built into the side of a hill, with a good view of the approach from below and thick timber all around. Cole dismounted and helped Catherine down, then led the horses to a lean-to shelter attached to the cabin. Inside, the shack was basic but functional. A pot-belly stove, a rough table and chairs, a single bed with a straw mattress, shelves for supplies. Cole lit a lantern and started a fire in the stove while Catherine looked around with wide eyes. This is where we are staying, she asked. Just for a few days while I figure out how to handle this situation, Cole said. It is not fancy, but it is safe. Nobody will find you here. Catherine set her bag down and turned to face him. In the warm glow of the lantern light, she looked impossibly beautiful and impossibly brave. Cole, what are we really doing here? Even if we hide for now, Hartley will not give up. He has too much to lose. Cole crossed the small space between them and took her hands in his. Then we stop running and we fight. Not with guns, though I will use mine if I have to. We fight with the truth. You have your father's journal, right? The evidence he collected, Catherine nodded. I have kept it with me always. It is in my bag. Then we find someone who cannot be bought, someone with the power to actually do something about Hartley and his operation. We send that evidence to the right people, along with your testimony. We expose him so thoroughly that he has no choice but to leave you alone. And if that does not work, Catherine asked quietly, then we will deal with that when the time comes, Cole said. But I am not going to let anyone hurt you, Catherine, I promise you that. She looked up at him and something shifted in her expression. Why are you doing all of this? We have known each other for such a short time, you should not care this much about what happens to me. But I do care, Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. Catherine, I have been drifting my whole life, never really feeling like I belonged anywhere or with anyone. And then you stepped off that stagecoach and suddenly everything was different. Suddenly I knew exactly where I wanted to be, and that was wherever you are. Cole, she whispered, and there were tears in her eyes now. I am in love with you, he said, the words coming out bold and true. I know it is fast, and I know we are in the middle of a terrible situation, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you, Catherine Blackwell. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love the sound of your laugh and the way you bite your lip when you are thinking. I love everything about you, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe so that we can have a future together. For a moment, Catherine just stared at him, her eyes swimming with tears. Then she was moving, closing the distance between them, and her hands were in his hair and her lips were on his. And Cole was kissing her back with all the pent-up longing and love he had been carrying for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Catherine pressed her forehead against his. I love you too, she said, her voice shaking. I have been trying so hard not to, trying to protect you from my problems, but I cannot help it. I love you, Cole Brennan. I love you so much it terrifies me. Cole wrapped his arms around her and held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against his. Then we face the terror together, he murmured, and we come out the other side stronger for it. They stood there holding each other for a long time, finding comfort and strength in each other's embrace. Eventually, Cole pulled back enough to look at her face. You should get some rest. Tomorrow I am going to ride back to town and send some telegrams. There has to be someone back east who is not corrupt, someone who will actually investigate Hartley properly. What if the man who came looking for me is still there? Catherine asked, worry creasing her brow. Then I will deal with him, Cole said grimly. One way or another, this ends soon, Catherine. I am not going to let you live in fear for the rest of your life. That night, Cole insisted that Catherine take the bed while he made himself a bedroll on the floor. She protested, but he would not hear of it. As he lay there in the darkness, listening to her soft breathing, he thought about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. He had come to Wyoming looking for land and a future, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. He just had to make sure she lived long enough for them to have that life together. The next morning, Cole rode back down to Cheyenne, leaving Catherine at the line shack with his rifle and strict instructions to shoot anyone who approached except for him. The ride gave him time to think, to plan. By the time he reached town, he knew what he had to do. His first stop was the marshal's office. Tom Crawford was a hard man but a fair one, and Cole trusted him more than most. He found the marshal at his desk, going through wanted posters. Cole, Tom greeted him. What brings you by? Cole closed the door behind him and took a seat. I need your help with something. It involves the stranger who was in town yesterday asking questions about a woman. The marshal's eyes sharpened. I heard about that. Did not sit right with me, a man like that hunting a woman. You know something about it. Cole told him everything, from the moment Catherine had arrived in Cheyenne to the evidence she carried against Victor Hartley and his smuggling operation. When he finished, Marshal Crawford leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. That is quite a story, he said. And you believe her? I know her, Cole corrected. And yes, I believe every word. The question is, what can we do about it? Crawford was quiet for a moment, thinking. I have contacts with the Federal Marshal's Service. This kind of interstate crime, smuggling, murder, that would fall under their jurisdiction. I can send a telegram, lay out the situation, see if they will send someone to investigate. But that is going to take time, and from what you are telling me, time is not something you have much of. What about the man who is looking for her? Cole asked. I have been keeping an eye on him, Crawford said. He is staying at the hotel, asking questions around town, but so far nobody is telling him anything useful. I could arrest him on suspicion, but without any actual proof he has broken a law, I could not hold him long. Cole nodded slowly. What if we could get him to confess? Get him to admit why he is really here and what he intends to do. You have a plan, the marshal asked, raising an eyebrow. The beginning of one, Cole admitted, but I am going to need your help to pull it off. They spent the next hour working out the details. It was risky, but if it worked, they would have everything they needed to not only protect Catherine but to bring down Hartley's entire operation. When Cole finally left the marshal's office, he felt a mixture of fear and determination. This had to work. There was no other option. His next stop was the telegraph office. He sent 3 messages. One to the Federal Marshal's Service in Denver, laying out the situation and requesting immediate assistance. One to a lawyer he knew in Kansas City who specialized in criminal cases. And one to a newspaper editor in Boston who had a reputation for exposing corruption. If Hartley thought he could make this problem disappear quietly, he was about to learn otherwise. Cole's final stop before heading back to the line shack was the general store, where he bought more supplies and some items that had nothing to do with survival in the wilderness. When the shopkeeper raised an eyebrow at one particular purchase, Cole just smiled and said it was for someone special. Catherine was standing on the porch of the line shack with the rifle in her hands when Cole rode up that afternoon. She lowered it with visible relief when she recognized him, and he felt his heart squeeze at the sight of her. Even after just one day, he had missed her terribly. "Any trouble?" he asked as he dismounted. "Just a deer that wandered too close and scared me half to death," Catherine said with a shaky laugh. "How did it go in town?" Cole told her about his meetings with the marshal and the telegrams he had sent. With each word, he could see hope beginning to kindle in her eyes, replacing some of the fear that had lived there for so long. "Do you really think it will work?" she asked when he finished. "I think we have a fighting chance," Cole said, "but there is one more thing we need to do. Tomorrow night, the marshal and I are going to set a trap for Hartley's man. We are going to get him to admit why he is here and what his orders are. But I need you to trust me, Catherine. I need you to believe that I am not going to let anything happen to you." Catherine stepped closer and took his hand. "I do trust you, with my life." Cole pulled her into his arms and held her tight. They stood there on that remote mountain porch, the autumn wind starting to carry a hint of winter cold, and he made another silent promise. This was going to work. He was going to make sure of it. That evening, as they sat by the fire eating a simple meal of beans and bread, Catherine showed him the journal her father had kept. It was a small leather-bound book, filled with neat handwriting that detailed dates, times, ships, and cargo. Names of men involved in the smuggling operation. Records of payments made. It was damning evidence, the kind that could bring down not just Hartley but a dozen other corrupt businessmen and officials. "My father was so careful," Catherine said softly, running her fingers over the pages. He knew how dangerous this was, but he could not stand by and watch these men profit from their crimes. "He was a brave man," Cole said, "and he would be proud of you for trying to finish what he started." Catherine looked up at him, the firelight casting shadows across her face. "I have been so scared for so long, scared that I would be killed like my father was, scared that I would never be able to stop running. But being here with you, I am starting to believe that maybe there is another way. Maybe we really can make this right." Cole reached across the small table and took her hand. "We will make it right, and then we are going to build the life we both want, a home, land, a future, all of it." "Tell me about this land Tom offered you," Catherine said, and Cole could hear the hope in her voice. "Tell me what you want to build." So he did. He told her about the piece of property on the edge of the Double T, about the creek that ran through it, and the stand of cottonwood trees that would provide shade in summer. He told her about the house he wanted to build, not too big but solid and well-made, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. He told her about the horses he wanted to raise, the cattle he wanted to run, the life he wanted to create. And as he talked, he could see Catherine's eyes light up with the same dream. She began to add her own ideas: a garden near the house, a schoolroom where she could teach the children of nearby ranchers, a porch where they could sit together in the evenings and watch the sunset. They talked long into the night, building their future in words, making it real between them. And when they finally went to bed, Catherine in the single bunk and Cole on the floor beside her, they both slept better than they had in weeks, wrapped in the warmth of shared dreams. The next day passed slowly as they waited for evening to come. Cole checked and rechecked his weapons, making sure everything was in working order. Catherine read from a book she had brought with her, though he could tell she was having trouble concentrating. The tension between them was palpable, the knowledge that everything would be decided in the next few hours. As the sun began to set, Cole saddled his horse. "Remember what I told you," he said to Catherine. "No matter what happens, you stay here, do not come to town, do not try to help. If I am not back by dawn, you take the horses and ride to the Double T Ranch. Tom will protect you and help you get to safety." "Cole, I do not like this," Catherine said, her voice tight with worry. "What if something goes wrong?" He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. "Nothing is going to go wrong. I'm going to come back to you and then we are going to start our life together. I promise." "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," he said. More than anything. Riding away from her was one of the hardest things Cole had ever done, but he forced himself to keep going down the mountain and back toward Cheyenne. As he rode, he went over the plan in his mind one more time. It had to work perfectly. There would be no second chances. He met Marshal Crawford behind the saloon just as full darkness fell. The lawman looked grim but determined. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I will ever be," Cole said. "Is he in position?" "Jack is talking to him right now, telling him someone has information about the woman he is looking for. If he takes the bait, he should be heading to the stable in about 10 minutes. Cole and the marshal made their way to the stable, where they concealed themselves in empty stalls. The smell of hay and horses filled the air, and Cole's heart was pounding so hard he was sure it could be heard across the entire building. But he kept his breathing steady and his hand on his pistol, ready for whatever came next. Right on schedule, the stranger appeared at the stable door. He looked around cautiously before stepping inside. "Hello, someone said they had information for me." Cole stepped out of the shadows, his gun drawn but pointed at the ground. "That would be me." The stranger's hand went to his jacket, where Cole assumed he kept his own weapon, but Marshal Crawford appeared from the other side with his shotgun leveled. "I would not do that if I were you, friend. Hands where I can see them." The man's face went hard with anger. "What is this?" "You have no right to detain me. I have done nothing wrong." "Then you would not mind answering a few questions," Crawford said, "starting with why you are really looking for Catherine Blackwell." The stranger's eyes flicked between Cole and the marshal, calculating his options. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Sure you do," Cole said, his voice hard. "You work for Victor Hartley. He sent you to find Catherine and eliminate her before she can testify against him, before the evidence she has can bring down his entire smuggling operation." "You are insane," the man said, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition that his cover was blown. "Am I?" Cole asked. "Then explain this." He pulled out a telegram he had received just before leaving town. "This is from the Federal Marshal Service. They have been investigating Hartley for months, ever since an honest detective in Boston contacted them about James Blackwell's murder. They know all about the smuggling, the bribes, the intimidation. And they have been looking for Catherine Blackwell because they need her testimony and her father's journal to build their case." The stranger's face went pale. "If you know all of that, then you know these are dangerous men. You should stay out of it." "Too late for that," Cole said. "I am already in it. The question is, are you smart enough to save yourself? The federal marshals are on their way here right now. They will be in Cheyenne within the week. You can cooperate with them, testify against Hartley and his associates, and maybe get some leniency. Or you can keep your mouth shut and go down with the rest of them." There was a long silence in the stable, broken only by the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Cole kept his eyes on the stranger, watching for any sudden movement. Finally, the man's shoulders sagged. "You do not understand. If I cooperate, Hartley will have me killed. He has people everywhere." "Not out here he does not," Marshal Crawford said, "and not where you will be going. The federal marshals can protect you, put you somewhere Hartley cannot reach. But only if you help them build their case." The stranger looked between them again, and Cole could see him weighing his options. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right, I will talk, but I want protection. Real protection, not just promises." "You will get it," Crawford said. "Now, nice and slow, take out your weapon and hand it over." The man complied, moving carefully to avoid spooking the marshal into firing. Once he was disarmed, Crawford marched him toward the jail while Cole followed behind, every nerve still on high alert. It was not until the cell door clanged shut that Cole allowed himself to believe it had actually worked. "We did it," he said, the words coming out on a breath of relief. "We did," Crawford agreed. "But this is just the first step. We still need the federal marshals to actually get here and build their case, and there is no guarantee Hartley would not send more men." "But now Catherine can testify without fear," Cole said. "Now she has the protection of the law on her side. That changes everything." Crawford nodded. "Get back to her. Tell her what happened. Tell her she can stop running." Cole did not need to be told twice. He practically ran to where he had left his horse, swung into the saddle, and headed back up the mountain at a pace that was probably reckless in the darkness. But he did not care. He needed to get to Catherine, needed to tell her that it was over, that she was finally safe. The ride seemed to take forever, but finally he saw the warm glow of lantern light in the window of the lined shack. He dismounted quickly and burst through the door to find Catherine standing in the middle of the room, the rifle in her hands, her face pale with worry. "Cole," she gasped, lowering the weapon. "Thank God, I was so worried." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her heart beating against his chest. "It is over," he said into her hair. "It worked. The man is in custody and he is going to cooperate with the federal marshals. You are safe, Catherine. You are finally safe." She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain?" "I am sure," he said, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "The marshals are on their way. They are going to use your testimony and your father's journal to take down Hartley and everyone involved. You do not have to hide anymore. You do not have to be afraid anymore." Catherine let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was kissing him with a desperation and joy that made Cole's head spin. He kissed her back with everything he had, pouring all his love and relief into the embrace. When they finally came up for air, Catherine was smiling through her tears. "So what happens now?" Cole took her hand and led her to sit on the edge of the bed. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the small package he had bought at the general store the day before. With slightly shaking hands, he unwrapped it to reveal a simple gold ring. "Catherine Blackwell," he said, dropping to one knee before her. "I know we have not known each other long. I know we have been through hell together in the short time since you came to Cheyenne. But I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build that house with the east-facing windows. I want to raise horses and children with you. I want to wake up every morning and see your face on the pillow next to mine. Will you marry me?" Fresh tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks, but she was laughing now, pure and joyful. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes, I will marry you, Cole Brennan." He slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled him up to kiss him again. They held each other for a long time, swaying slightly in the lantern light, wrapped in the knowledge that they had made it through the darkness and come out the other side together. "When should we do it?" Catherine asked eventually. "Get married, I mean," Cole smiled against her hair. "As soon as possible. I have waited my whole life to find you. I do not want to wait another day longer than necessary to make you my wife." They spent the rest of that night making plans, talking about their future with the freedom of people who no longer had to look over their shoulders. They would stay at the line shack for a few more days, just until the federal marshals arrived and Catherine could give her official testimony. Then they would go back to Cheyenne, get married by the circuit preacher, and start building their life together on the land Tom had offered to sell Cole. Catherine talked about the school she wanted to start, not just for ranch children, but for anyone in the territory who wanted to learn. Cole talked about the breeding program he wanted to develop, raising horses that were both strong and intelligent. They dreamed together, building their future word by word, and by the time the sun rose, they both felt like they had been given a second chance at life. The federal marshals arrived in Cheyenne 4 days later, just as Marshal Crawford's telegram had promised. There were 3 of them, led by a stern but fair man named Daniel Morrison, who took Catherine's testimony with careful attention to every detail. He examined James Blackwell's journal, his eyes growing harder with each page he read. "This is exactly what we need," he told Catherine and Cole when he finished. "Combined with the testimony of Hartley's man, who is falling all over himself to cooperate, this will be enough to indict Hartley and at least a dozen others. You have done a brave thing, Miss Blackwell. Your father would be very proud." "When will the trial be?" Catherine asked, and Cole heard the slight tremor in her voice. She was putting on a brave face, but he knew the idea of going back east, even under federal protection, frightened her. "Not for several months," Marshal Morrison said. "We need to build a thorough case, gather more evidence, bring in the other witnesses. But when the time comes, we will need you to return to Boston to testify." Cole squeezed Catherine's hand. "We will both go. She would not face this alone." Marshal Morrison nodded approvingly. "That is good. The journey will be easier with support. In the meantime, you are free to resume your normal lives. Hartley is finished, whether he knows it yet or not. He has no reason to come after you anymore, Miss Blackwell. The evidence is already in our hands." After the marshals left, Cole and Catherine walked through Cheyenne together, and for the first time since her arrival, she did not look over her shoulder every few steps. She walked with her head high, her hand tucked into Cole's arm, and the townspeople who had grown to know her over the past weeks smiled and nodded in greeting. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Catherine wore a dress of pale blue that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Cole had picked that morning from the meadow near the line shack. Tom Weston stood as Cole's witness and Mrs. Patterson stood for Catherine, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief through the entire service. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed his bride with a tenderness that made more than one person in attendance wipe away tears. Looking at Catherine's radiant face, Cole felt his heart swell with more happiness than he had ever thought possible. "I love you, Mrs. Brennan," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Brennan," she replied, her green eyes sparkling with joy. They held a small celebration at the saloon, where Jack the bartender refused to let them pay for anything, and several of the ranch hands toasted their health with enthusiastic if slightly off-key songs. It was not fancy, but it was full of warmth and friendship, and Catherine told Cole later that it was exactly the kind of wedding she had always wanted. That night, they stayed at the hotel in Cheyenne, the first time they had been truly alone as husband and wife. Cole carried Catherine over the threshold of their room, and she laughed with delight at the old-fashioned gesture. He set her down gently and took her face in his hands. "Are you happy?" he asked, needing to hear the words. "I am more than happy," Catherine said softly. "I am home. With you, I am finally home." They made love for the first time that night, a tender and passionate joining that sealed the promises they had made to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Catherine's head on Cole's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me about the house again," she murmured sleepily. "Tell me what our life is going to be like." So Cole told her, painting pictures with words of the future they would build together. He told her about the house they would construct with their own hands, about the horses they would raise and the land they would work. He told her about the children they would have someday, sons and daughters who would grow up wild and free under the wide Wyoming sky. He told her about growing old together, sitting on their porch in matching rocking chairs, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. And as he talked, Catherine smiled and added her own details to the picture. The apple trees she would plant, the books she would order from back east, the traditions they would start and pass down through generations. Together, they built their future in the darkness of that hotel room, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever imagined. The next morning, they rode out to look at the land Tom was selling them. It was everything Cole had described and more. The creek ran clear and cold, fed by mountain snowmelt. The cottonwood trees stood tall and proud, their leaves just beginning to turn gold with the coming of autumn. The grass was thick and green, perfect for horses and cattle. "This is it," Catherine said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "This is where we are going to build our life. This is where we are going to be happy," Cole agreed, pulling her close. They spent that day walking every inch of their new property, planning where the house would go, where the barn and corrals would be built, where Catherine's garden would flourish. By the time they rode back to town that evening, they both felt like they had taken the first real step toward the future they wanted. Over the next several months, they threw themselves into building their dream. Cole and several of the men from the Double T worked on constructing the house, raising the walls log by log. Catherine helped where she could, and when the physical work was too heavy, she prepared meals and kept the workers supplied with coffee and encouragement. The house came together slowly but surely. It was not large, just 4 rooms to start with, but it was solid and well made. Cole took pride in every nail he hammered, every board he placed, knowing he was building something that would last, something that would shelter his family for generations to come. While the house was being built, Catherine continued teaching at the schoolhouse in town, though she now rode back and forth from the construction site rather than staying at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The children adored her, and several of the ranching families had already asked if she would consider opening her own school once she and Cole were settled. In December, as the first real snow began to fall, they moved into their completed house. It was not fully finished, there were still details to attend to, but it had a roof, walls, windows, and most importantly, a warm bed where they could sleep wrapped in each other's arms. That first night in their new home, Cole built a fire in the stone fireplace he had constructed with his own hands, and they sat together on the floor, watching the flames dance. "I cannot believe this is real," Catherine said softly. "6 months ago, I was running for my life. Now I am sitting in a house I helped build, married to the man I love, starting a whole new life." "It is real," Cole assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it is only going to get better." Christmas came, and they spent it quietly together, just the two of them and the life they were building. Cole gave Catherine a beautiful saddle he had commissioned from the town's leatherworker, tooled with flowers and her initials. She gave him a pocket watch she had ordered from a catalog, with an inscription inside that read, "To my cowboy, my love, my home." "Forever yours, Catherine." In January, word came from Marshal Morrison. The trial was set for March, and they would need to travel to Boston in time for Catherine to testify. Cole could see the old fear try to creep back into his wife's eyes, but he held her close and reminded her that she was not alone, that he would be with her every step of the way. They made the journey east together in late February, taking the railroad that now connected Wyoming to the rest of the country. It was Catherine's first time on a train, and despite the circumstances, Cole was glad to see her marvel at the speed and convenience of modern travel. Boston was everything Cole had expected and more. Crowded, noisy, full of buildings that loomed overhead and people who rushed everywhere without seeming to see each other. He hated it instantly, but he kept that to himself, not wanting to worry Catherine any more than she already was. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and it was brutal. Catherine had to testify about her father's death, about the evidence he had collected, about the fear she had lived with for months. Hartley's lawyers tried to discredit her, to make her seem like a hysterical woman inventing stories. But she stood firm, her voice never wavering as she told the truth. Cole sat in the courtroom every day, his presence a silent support. Whenever Catherine's voice threatened to break, she would look at him, and he would nod encouragingly, reminding her without words that he believed in her, that he was proud of her. The journal James Blackwell had kept proved to be the decisive evidence. Page after page of meticulous records, dates, names, amounts. Combined with the testimony of Hartley's former associate who had been arrested in Cheyenne, and several other witnesses the federal marshals had located, the case against Victor Hartley was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Hartley was sentenced to 20 years in prison, along with most of his associates. The corrupt police officers who had been on his payroll were fired and faced their own trials. James Blackwell's name was cleared, and his reputation as an honest businessman was restored. When it was all over, Catherine stood on the steps of the courthouse and took a deep breath of cold Boston air. Cole stood beside her, his hand in hers, and she turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "It is finally over," she said. "Truly over." "It is," Cole agreed, pulling her into his arms. "And now we get to go home." They left Boston the next day and did not look back. The train carried them west, away from the city and its painful memories, back toward the wide-open spaces and the life they were building together. With each mile they traveled, Cole could see Catherine relax, the weight she had been carrying for so long finally lifting from her shoulders. When they arrived back in Cheyenne in early April, the town turned out to welcome them home. There was a celebration at the saloon, with people congratulating Catherine on her bravery and toasting their safe return. It was overwhelming and wonderful, and by the time they finally rode home to their ranch that night, both Cole and Catherine were exhausted but happy. Spring turned to summer, and their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Cole worked the land, building up their horse herd and starting to establish the breeding program he had dreamed of. Catherine opened her school, teaching not just children but also adults who had never learned to read and write. The little schoolhouse she built on their property quickly became a center of learning for the entire region. In late August, Catherine came to Cole with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant, expecting their first child in the spring. He swept her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said, still hardly able to believe it. "We are," Catherine confirmed, her eyes shining. "We are going to have a family, Cole, a real family." That winter was spent preparing for the baby's arrival. Cole built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge that could harm delicate skin. Catherine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her needle flying as she hummed old songs her own mother had sung to her. They talked for hours about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about all the love they would give this child. Their son was born on a warm day in April of 1880, arriving just as the wildflowers were starting to bloom across the meadow. Catherine labored through the afternoon with Mrs. Patterson and the town doctor in attendance, and Cole wore a path in the floor outside their bedroom with his pacing. When he finally heard the baby's cry, strong and healthy, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Patterson opened the door with a huge smile. "You have a son, Cole, a beautiful, healthy boy." Cole went into the bedroom to find Catherine propped up on pillows, exhausted but glowing with a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with so much love it took his breath away. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Cole approached slowly, almost afraid to disturb the perfect scene before him. When he looked down at the baby with his tiny perfect features and shock of dark hair, he felt tears prick his eyes. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered, "just like his mother." "We are calling him James," Catherine said. After my father, James Cole Brennan. Cole nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and put his arm around his wife, looking down at their son. In that moment, he felt more complete than he had ever thought possible. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Not just land or success, but this. Family, home, love. Little James grew quickly, healthy and strong. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn chin, and by the time he was a year old, he was already trying to follow Cole around the ranch on wobbly legs. Catherine would shake her head and laugh, scooping him up before he could get into too much trouble. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Clara, with golden hair and a sweet temperament. And 2 years after that, another son they named Thomas after Cole's boss, who had helped them in those early dangerous days. Their house rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and both Cole and Catherine agreed they had never been happier. Cole's horse breeding program became known throughout the territory. People came from as far away as Colorado and Montana to buy his horses, which were prized for their intelligence, strength, and gentle temperament. The ranch prospered, and Cole was able to buy more land, expanding their holdings until they had one of the most successful operations in Wyoming. Catherine's school also thrived. She taught 3 generations of children, many of whom went on to become teachers themselves, spreading education across the growing state. She never lost her love of learning or her belief that everyone deserved a chance to better themselves through knowledge. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Catherine back to the spot where he had first told her he loved her, at the edge of Cheyenne where the buildings gave way to grassland. Their children were spending the night with Mrs. Patterson, giving them a rare evening alone together. "Do you remember standing here?" Cole asked, holding her hand as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I remember everything about that day," Catherine said. "I remember being so scared, so certain that I would never be safe or happy again. And then you told me you loved me, and suddenly I could see a future where both those things were possible." "I meant every word I said that day," Cole told her. "And I mean them even more now. I love you, Catherine Brennan. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Catherine replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. "You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You gave me love when I thought I would always be alone. You gave me a family and a life and a future. I love you so much, Cole." They stood there holding each other as the sun set on another perfect day, and Cole thought about everything they had been through together. The danger and fear of those early days, the joy of building their home and starting their family, the satisfaction of watching their dreams become reality. He thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 12 years ago, running from enemies and certain she would never be safe again. And he thought about how he had told her that the West was where she belonged with him. He had been right. This land, this life, this love, it was exactly where they both belonged. As the stars began to appear overhead, Cole and Catherine turned and walked hand in hand back toward their ranch, toward their home, toward their children waiting for them. They had built something lasting here, something that would endure long after they were gone. They had built a legacy of love and courage and determination, and they had built it together. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a strong young man who loved working the horses as much as his father did. Clara became a teacher like her mother, taking over the school when Catherine decided it was time to focus more on her growing brood of grandchildren. Thomas followed in the family tradition, buying his own piece of land adjacent to the ranch and starting his own operation. Cole and Catherine grew old together, just as Cole had promised in those early days when they were building their future with words and hope. Their hair turned gray and lines appeared on their faces, but the love in their eyes never dimmed. They still held hands when they walked. They still stole kisses when they thought no one was looking. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. On a warm summer evening in 1910, 32 years after Catherine had first arrived in Cheyenne, they sat in those matching rocking chairs Cole had dreamed of so long ago. Their children and grandchildren were gathered in the yard, laughing and playing, filling the air with the sounds of family. "We did it," Catherine said softly, reaching over to take Cole's hand. "We built exactly the life we said we would." "We did more than that," Cole replied, squeezing her fingers gently. "We built something that will last long after we are gone. Look at them, Catherine. All of that, all those people down there, they exist because a scared woman stepped off a stagecoach one day and I was smart enough to fall in love with her." Catherine laughed, the same musical sound that had captivated him all those decades ago. "I think I was the lucky one. I told a cowboy I had enemies back east, and he said the West was where I belonged with him. That was the moment my life truly began." "Our life," Cole corrected, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Everything we have, everything we are, we built together." As the sun set on another perfect Wyoming day, Cole Brennan looked at his wife, his family, his legacy, and knew with absolute certainty that he had lived a good life. He had found his purpose that day in Cheyenne when he saw a frightened woman with emerald eyes and auburn hair step down from a stagecoach. He had found his home in her arms, and he had found his happiness in the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, year by year. The West had been exactly where Catherine belonged, with him, and he had been exactly where he belonged, with her. Together they had turned fear into courage, danger into safety, and uncertainty into the kind of love that poets write about and dreamers aspire to. Their story, which had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into something legendary in the territory, would be told and retold for generations. The tale of the woman who ran from enemies and the cowboy who told her she belonged in the West. The story of how love and courage can overcome any obstacle. The legend of Catherine and Cole Brennan, who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to help a stranger, to believe in love, and to build a future together no matter what stands in the way. And as the stars came out over Wyoming that night, shining down on the ranch they had built and the family they had created, Cole and Catherine Brennan rocked gently in their chairs, hands still entwined after more than 3 decades, living proof that true love really does conquer all, and that the West was indeed where Catherine belonged, right there beside her cowboy, for all the days of their lives and into the forever they had promised each other so long ago.